Hello, you bloody wonderful people. Welcome to the Meditation Hub and welcome to a mentor's guide to feeling alone. And, I think at some point we're all going to have the experience of feeling alone. And I don't necessarily mean being alone because, funnily enough, a lot of people experience isolation, disconnectedness, and feeling alone, even when they're surrounded by a million other people, even when they're with family or even when they're with friends. And then the opposite is true as well. A lot of people feel um, deep connection and togetherness and contentment when they're all by themselves. So we're not necessarily talking about physically being alone, but the inner feeling of aloneness. And if you haven't felt that before, it's coming at some point. So hopefully this advice can help. It's what I'd call counterintuitive advice, and it always surprises people. But in my experience of working one on one with people for over 12 years, it really, really helps. So here's the advice in a nutshell, and then we'll spend a couple of minutes unpacking it. The weird advice I've got for you is if you are having an experience of feeling alone, go and be more alone. Go and be more alone. And before we unpack this weird idea, a couple of disclaimers. The first one is this idea works particularly well if you have an existing toolkit that you can turn to help you process your inner experiences, like journaling, emotional processing, meditation, whatever you use to become aware of what you're genuinely experiencing and a way to alchemize it and move through it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that this advice works well if you have a mentor, a coach, a guide, a psychologist, a counselor, a leader, someone you can turn to. So even when you're going through this moment of aloneness, you know you have support in at least someone. Um, so those two things really help with this advice. If you don't have one of those two things, it's not the best advice for you. This advice is for, I'm in the game. What I personally do, I'm in the game of real inner, genuine transformation. And so, what I want to do is take what people are experiencing that hinders them or that burdens them and transform it. So, this advice helps with that. If you're someone that's experiencing deep depression and the feeling or the idea of aloneness takes you deep into utter despair, and you start to have really challenging thoughts in that space, then this will not be the advice for you either. So, disclaimer done. Let's get to it. Let's rewind the clock back. Holy shit, a long time ago to when I was 24. I'm 42 now, so we're going back in years. Back to when I had a few less grey hairs in the beard and a little more hair on my head. And I was traveling around Australia by myself. And I ended up living in my truck for close to 20 months, nearly 2 years. And I absolutely loved it. But every now and then, spending all that time alone in Australia is a big, remote place. So spending all that time alone, of course, there'd be moments when I'd be like, I just want to see another human, or I want to go have a beer with someone, or I want to, have a chat with someone, or I want to connect with someone. And what I noticed was really interesting over all the time that I traveled around Australia was this. If I felt alone, like needy, there was some kind of inner isolation and there was a desperation for connection, I would move from the place of feeling alone and go out into the world, go to a pub or a restaurant or a footy mat, I don't know where I'd go, trying to find someone to connect with. And the interesting thing is, I'd always find someone to connect with, but the friendships or connections I would forge when I came from a place of lack would never be friendships that would really last or that would move to a really meaningful place. It wouldn't meet the need I actually wanted. I wouldn't feel deeply satisfied with the kind of connections I'd build if I came from that place. Now, why is that? When I really got still and looked at it, I recognized I was moving out into the world, being someone who needed something. And I always have this knowing that my experience, the way I experience the world, is reflective of the state of mind I'm in and the lens I'm seeing the world through. And if I'm feeling unfulfilled and needy, that's the seed I'm planting. And whatever we sow, so shall we reap. The experiences I have are less than deeply fulfilling. And when I started to realize this, anytime a feeling of aloneness would come up, and this happened quite a few times, I'd be like, I just want to see someone, or I'm feeling restless or clingy or whatever it might be, agitated. The first thing I'd want to do is go do something to dissolve the feeling. And it might relieve it, but it didn't change it. It might relieve it, but it didn't change it. And so what I started doing was feeling alone or any variation of that. I'd go, this is an indicator that I need to go be more alone. So I drove deeper into the bush, find a place I could have a fire, light a fire, cook a nice meal, sit down and go through one of many practices and processes I was exploring and learning at the time. Meditation, emotional release work, just self-reflection, and of course, journaling I found really helpful in those years. And through this, variety of practices, what I'd feel is the very inner experience of aloneness would be relieved. And not relieved in terms of turn down a little bit, move through it, transform it, alchemize it so it becomes nectar. And I'd be left with feeling wholeness, connection, and contentedness. Contentedness. The interesting thing when you feel contentedness is all of a sudden you have a greater capacity to hear and recognize the natural impulses in terms of the highest action that we can take, the most effective action we can take in any given moment. Like what impulses genuinely moving through me, not from a place or lack of need, but from a place of fulfillment. The natural intelligence that bubbles up within me, where does it want to move to next? And sometimes the impulse would come, actually, I don't even want to see anyone. I don't need anything right now. I'm just going to keep bathing in contentedness and sitting in the bush by the fire. Sometimes the impulse would come like a feeling, an intuitive impulse, go to this place and go do this thing, or I feel excited and inspired to go see this person, or whatever it might be. And whenever I was able to move from a place of existing fulfillment and the experience of contentedness, if I met someone or a group of people from that place, what I started to notice was they'd be the kind of friendships, the people that I'm still friends with today, the kind of friendships that move your heart, the kind of connections that you have like real rich conversation and you can share the deepest parts of yourself and it's reciprocated. And I started to notice that the way I move through the world reflects the world that bounces back to me. And this has been psychologically validated, understanding that we are perceptual creatures and the lens we're seeing through determines what we are drawn to and what we pick out from a crowd or any given situation. So it's so interesting to go, the real value and the real key here is to recognize who am I being and how am I moving through the world. So that was my learning. That's what I learned all those years ago. And since I started having kind of sharing those experiences with clients, there's been so many times where that advice or that message I've shared has been proven really powerful. So the first example that comes to mind is I had a client who was turning 40 and for him, birthdays were always a really big deal. And he had this experience like, I always put a lot of effort in to make other people's birthdays really great for them. But when it comes to me, I feel left out, or like no one really cares about me the same way I care about them. No one goes to the same amount of effort. And there was this whole inner experience, which was real for him, real story about, missing out on great birthday celebrations. And he felt alone, he felt isolated, he felt disconnected, all these things. And I said to him, I'm going to set you a challenge for what has been your biggest birthday so far in your life, which is going to be your 40th, and what you would want to happen in your 40th, rather than try to plan something for yourself because no one else is going to, or feel like no one could live up to your expectations. I want you to actually, you had a motorbike, get on your motorbike and just go away by yourself. And he went on this multi-day cruise on his motorbike, staying at different guest houses and hotels and things like that. Drive, sleep a night, drive, sleep a night. And I remember getting this message on the day of his 40th birthday where he was somewhere remote. I was in Bali at the time, somewhere remote, Bali up in the mountains. And he came out of this guest house all by himself, walked out over a rice terrace and sat on the top of a hill where a sun rose on the dawn of his 40th birthday. And he sent me a message, tears in his eyes. This is the best birthday I've ever had. And leading up to that moment, he'd moved through all of the story and all of the emotionality and all of the pain that was very real, but that was hindering him from just being able to be deeply content and needy, unnecessarily needy. And so it's not to say he might not genuinely, it's not to say that he shouldn't want to have birthday parties, but this was an ongoing pattern where his life was affirming the belief that he had. So when he moved through belief, all of a sudden it's like, I don't need anything or anyone to be happy and joyful. I'm content now. That's the place the real beautiful relationships are forged from. So that was a really cool experience. And then I had another client um, who, yeah, another client super recently actually who um, it was feeling alone and like everyone that this client knew, all of her friends were in relationships and she was not. And it was making her feel really alone and even potentially making some bad decisions to try to get rid of the feeling of aloneness, stuff she wouldn't usually do. And so I shared this conversation with her, and she messaged me recently saying, I did what you said. The feelings came up, and I could see the bad decisions dawning. So I took myself further away and went and stayed somewhere else for a little while to move through all of this stuff so that I don't continually act out of the same cycle, but I can actually change the very foundation of inner aloneness that has been coming up as a pattern through my whole adult life. Some people are stuck in those patterns for their whole adult life, not knowing that there is a way to forge real sustainable and lasting change and not even imagining the type of satisfaction that can be born out of inner contentedness and the kind of fulfillment that comes out of the contentedness when you act from that place. And then one more example, I've had a client who um, this was a woman, and anytime her husband did anything without her, she felt alone. That was her experience. And there was a tension in the relationship because um, anytime the husband did anything in particular for himself or with his mates or with his family, she was left feeling really alone. And then she was more like, don't do this stuff. And he's like, well, come with me. Oh, I don't want to do stuff. I just want to do stuff with you. There was a real tension, a back and forth tension. And I was lucky enough to work with this client, this woman, and be able to support her in moving through her role, her part in the tension in the relationship, and understanding that it's actually not about what the husband was doing or not doing. It's not about the circumstance or the condition. We could really look at where the sense of aloneness and the need for control comes from. That was so deeply empowering for her. and it changed, took the tension out of the relationship, and gave her the ability to be contented with her own experience and own presence. And of course, a deeper sense of mutual understanding and connection between them could be born out of that place. So, if and when you feel alone, isolated, disconnected, angsty, restless, the temptation will be to act out of the feelings as a way to avoid the discomfort of them. And my very strong recommendation is to turn toward the feelings themselves. Go close the doors to life and take yourself into a quiet, spacious moment where you're even more alone so you can truly hear and feel into the depths of the pain that you have. And it's not a very beautiful thing to do in the sense that it's uncomfortable, but it's beautiful in the sense that it's real and it gives you an opportunity to truly change a habitual pattern. So next time you do move out into the world, there's the possibility for deeper connection than you might have ever experienced before. So in this short video, obviously, we're not going to go into the what do I actually do when I close the doors to life and take that moment. That's maybe a conversation for another day. I've made so many other videos and courses and everything about that. This is more about an orientation towards change and what kind of worldview or mindset do I have about the emotions of aloneness that I'm experiencing. So I hope that's helpful. And I hope next time you feel any kind of aloneness, something goes ding, 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 this is my indicator to go be even more alone so I can forge a lasting and powerful change and be more empowered and connected and all together and available for the people I care about in my life than ever before. All right. Let me know how this lands. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for lending me your eyeballs and ear holes. I love you guys, and I'll see you all really soon.